Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, cha, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends that they can hear the show on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, CastBox, Player FM, Audible, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have a really wonderful show lined up for you today. Our main guest is Susie Spikol. She is here to celebrate forest magic for kids. And during our conversation, I discovered that Susie is a cousin of my former boss clown, Naomi Schaefer, former executive director of Clowns Without Borders. So we decided, let's take a listen back to Naomi's first appearance on Reading with Your Kids. Before we invite our guests into the studio, I would love to invite you to visit a very special website. It's clownswithoutborders.org. Clownswithoutborders.org. This is a group that I absolutely adore. I am part of Clowns Without Borders, and I had the honor of being part of the 2023 tour of El Salvador. I had so much fun joining with artists from all over the world to bring a smile to people who really needed it and really appreciated it too. And we would love for you to join us as a monthly Joy Maker. The Joy Makers, they're a family of people just like you who love to laugh and make other people feel good. So please take a moment and visit clownswithoutborders.org and consider joining me as a Joy Maker. My friends, if you have ever thought about owning a business that's fun, rewarding, and makes a valuable contribution to kids' education, well, Brooklyn Robot Foundry is calling your name. I recently met Ginny Young. She's the founder of Brooklyn Robot Foundry. And let me tell you, she is incredible. Her passion for getting kids excited about STEAM, that's STEM plus art, it's contagious. I'm telling you. This isn't your average kids program. Brooklyn Robot Foundry is all about hands-on, screen-free STEAM fun. These kids get to build a different robot each class and take it home with them afterwards. Kids love it. Parents are raving about it. And now you can own a franchise and bring this incredible experience to families in your community. Now, this isn't your typical franchise. Brooklyn Robot Foundry is a mobile, flexible business with a deep curriculum that's making a real impact in schools and communities around the country. Franchise owners get a proven curriculum, full training, and support from a passionate team. So what are you waiting for? Please visit bit.ly/robotjed. That's bit.ly/robotjed. And let them know you heard about it on Reading with Your Kids. My friends, I know we're going to have a great time because I just spent the last 20 minutes speaking to our guests, having such a great time. We're here to celebrate Forest Magic for Kids. It's a nonfiction nature activity guide. Please welcome to the show, Susie Spikol. Hey, Susie, how are you?
I'm great, Jed. It is such a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited, and I am the biggest fan of Reading with Your Kids. I just think that is really what we all should be doing more of.
Amen. Absolutely. And I am a fan of books that help get kids out. I am a fan of books that help get families out into nature together. And that's what Forest Magic is all about.
That is 100% true. I always like to tell people that my book isn't really so much for reading, but it's for doing. And I love that it's for doing with families. It's really about families going outside together and having shared experiences. And in this case, what I think is cool about Forest Magic is You don't have to really know anything about being outside. You don't have to know how to identify a tree or what butterfly you're seeing or what birds you're hearing. It's really about the imagination that nature gives all of us, and that space for us to explore and imagine and kind of connect to the landscape.
Yeah, nature is such an amazing thing that most of us don't see.
Yeah, it's true. I always like to tell people I'm a naturalist by training. I've spent the past 30 plus years teaching people about nature, and it's very science oriented. You know, I'm always talking about the science, the life cycle, the natural history of animals. I'm identifying things. And sometimes I've just lately been feeling like we're spending too much time, too much emphasis on that part of nature, like knowing nature that way. And instead really opening the door for kids to find nature as a way of playing and exploring and discovering, and then they can get into the science of it, you know, having that foundation of it.
And that's how I grew up. You know, I was one of those kids, I'm much, much older than you, much, much older than most people, much older than a lot of dirt. And I was one of those kids who you woke up in the morning and your parents said, out. Don't come back until the streetlights come on. And so we were out and playing, and I grew up in the city, but we were close enough to the woods. We call them the woods. And we would go there, and half the time we were trespassing. But it was a chance to be out in trees and hear birds and roll around and get dirty and find bugs and, you know, chase a snake and all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, my background's not that different than yours, Jed. I actually grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and there's not that much green space in Brooklyn, but I found every little crack in the sidewalk, every little like sliver between the buildings as a place for nature. And it's good to remind ourselves that nature doesn't just mean like the most wildest things you can imagine, like whales and bears and eagles, but it's really about, you know, something as small as a ladybug or an earthworm or the way the clouds are moving. And those types of experiences happen absolutely everywhere. And it's just really up to us to slow down and to model with our kids and share with our kids the moment of noticing.
Yeah. You know, I was impressed a couple of years ago. I came home and I was amazed at how powerful nature is. Not because of the wind or the hurricanes or anything like that. I came home and I'm looking at my recently paved driveway, and right in the middle, there's a plant has pushed its way through the blacktop and is sprouting up. And I'm like, dude, how did you get through? I couldn't get through there.
I know. Isn't that amazing, Jed? That's like resilience. It's the power of life, and nature is really that expression of it, and that you can find something like a flower growing out of a driveway or out of a crack in the sidewalk. And that's really magical and really important, kind of ways for kids to explore is those small scapes. You know, little kids especially, they don't need like a big vista. They just need a little small little spot for them to really notice and get involved in. So I love that you noticed that in your driveway.
Oh boy, yeah. We're fortunate. We still live within the city of Boston, but as I've said many times on the podcast, we are as far away from downtown Boston as you can be and still be in the city. And there is literally a wildlife sanctuary on the other side of my property. I could from right here, I could throw a ball and it would land in the wildlife sanctuary. Of course, I wouldn't throw a ball into the wildlife sanctuary, but, and we're on a migratory route for birds in the fall and spring. Every year there's one day we just go out and there's like a billion birds in our backyard.
Yeah, it's happening right now. This is May, or the kind of unwinding of spring into summer, and the birds are coming back, and there's like a way to track how many birds migrate through the night through using LiDAR and radar, and you get this bird cast. And just the other day, they said 1 million birds move through my neighborhood. at night. At night. Like imagine this tiny little hummingbird flying through the night to get back to where it's going to have its nest and navigating by the stars and by landmarks. And I just think nothing gets more magical than that. I mean, that's science. And that's kind of what I love is where science and nature kind of meet. That's where the magic is.
It really is. And you mentioned birds. I am fascinated. We had a robin create their nest in one of our bushes a few years back, and we were very careful not to disturb it, let the baby birds be hatched and born and go out. But I was able to look in and see the nest. And right around that same time, we had an author who was writing a nonfiction book about robin's nests. And I'm looking at the picture in the book and the nest that was in front of me, and they're identical. It was like the same architect came out or contractor came out and built both of them. I'm like, how does this happen? That bird has his brain is as big as my fingernail.
Yeah, I know. It's just amazing to think about that they have it sort of hardwired into them, that they come into the world kind of knowing how to make a nest and what to eat. And, I always think that there's a lot more to the wild animals in this world than we give them credit for. I'm a big believer in animals having a consciousness and having an inner life and having ways of communicating that as humans we don't quite completely understand yet.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were speaking about their people are investigating whether or not kids who have have severe autism, where they're nonverbal, have some kind of telepathy, because parents and teachers are seeing these things, but they don't report them because it's, like, oh, you're crazy, teacher, get away from me. Don't, how can a kid? And they're speculating that, the question they have is, number one, is this really happening? But also they're wondering, is this something new that these kids are developing, or was this something that we've always had that went dormant because as we became able to speak?
I love that. That's really fascinating. I'm definitely going to be doing a deep dive into that. I just think that's really interesting. And I think it's a really good reminder that there are so many different ways to know this world and to be in it. And as humans, I think we like to pretend that we know it all, but we really don't. And and really outside nature, that's kind of where you see it, where you're surprised by the mysteries of nature all the time, blown away by them.
Yeah, like watching a flock of geese, and they just turn to get. No one's making a signal, it's almost as if they have radio and like, okay, we're going left now, and they all turn.
Yeah, right. They have some sort of cell network that we don't quite understand, and I think that's true. I think there's a lot of things about this world that we don't quite figure out yet. I just did a presentation for some students on kind of mythical animals and the real animals that inspired them. So like mermaids, the scientists think, or historians think, that people who saw mermaids might actually have been seeing seals or manatees and maybe mermaids, but maybe not, right? So we were talking about kind of those places where our imagination kind of looks at the world, and we make up stories around it, which I think is really interesting. And just for me, it's a reminder that we are always in the process of discovery. And that's what's so cool about science, is it's not static. It's always changing.
So you grew up in Brooklyn. You had this affinity to find green spaces and a curiosity, but most kids the curiosity takes them so far, and it's okay, and then they find other things. You are so passionate about science and nature and communicating that with kids. Where did that passion come from?
Well, you're going to love this answer, but it really came from books. I didn't get into nature through the science. Like I didn't fall in love with nature and think I'm going to spend the rest of my life studying nature, because of the science. It was through reading books, that I saw that's where all the great adventures happen, like Stuart Little or, The Hobbit or Narnia. They go through the closet door and they end up in this wild world, which so much of it happens outside. And so as a kid in Brooklyn, where there were limited green spaces, I was always looking for the closet door to get to Narnia or, where I could find the fairies or the gnomes. And through that process, I found, nature and kind of got curious about that. And it just really stuck with me. And, I thought, I kind of knew when I was younger that I wanted to write, but it just took me a long time to get there, to get to the place in my life where I had the space to write. And I'm really fortunate that I've been able to combine my love of the natural world and teaching about the natural world with my writing. It's a perfect fit.
Awesome. Tell me, when we pick up Forest Magic for Kids, how specifically is it going to help us go out and be in nature and explore with our kids?
Yeah, so it's just full of activities, and the activities are really about what I like to call the loose parts of nature, kind of the sticks and the rocks and the leaves, and so, and connected to literature. So reading, there's a whole section in the book on little mice, and you might have noticed that there's tons of kids' books that star little mice characters, and they live in these like very cool little villages that they show. And in my book, it sort of encourages you to go out and make your own little mouse village and maybe make a little mouse-like creature or bring something out that you can pretend is a mouse and have adventures in there. So it's really kind of with your children, kind of entering this imaginative world and pretending a lot. And that's what the book gives you some guidelines on. There's a section on how to make potions. There's a section on secret forts, and those forts can be outside. They can also be inside if you want to take all the cushions off your couch and make a cushion fort and pretend you're a little mouse living inside a burrow. So it's that kind of way of playing in nature. There's a lot of whimsy to the book, and it is, again, not requiring that parents have any expertise in knowing anything about nature except how to play in it and how to encourage and model for their children how to do that.
Play is such an important thing, and unfortunately, kids aren't playing as much as they used to. There's this big, we've talked to countless kindergarten teachers who say kindergarten's become first grade, that kids aren't able to learn how to socialize through play because they're sitting down and reading. Kids are spending so much time on their devices. Kids are spending so much time in supervised activities, which, let's face it, if you got an adult in the room, you're not playing the way you and I played when we were kids.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, Jed. I am just feeling such an advocacy to encourage play and to remind parents that play is an actual right of childhood, and that play should be child-centered and child-driven. It shouldn't be structured. It should be loose. It should be playful. It should be coming right from their heart in their own way of being in the world. And I feel really concerned as an adult who's been working as a naturalist in schools for the past 30 years, I have also noticed a difference in how children play. And what I would say is they don't really know how to play. They don't know how to be independently playing. And that might be how to play in pairs or in small groups, but it might also even be how to play by themselves, which is a very important skill. Can you entertain yourself without a screen? And I notice when I'm driving by our local park, and parents are sitting out in the park and their kids are playing, parents are on their screens and they're not interacting with their kids. And all of this adds up in my heart as a big concern, because I worry, what are we losing as people when we don't give that space for our children to play? in the way of really freely playing like a child, really imagining, really building, really tinkering, problem solving. I think all of that develops grit for kids and resilience. And I feel concerned when we're losing play.
Yeah. Well, you and I both have somebody in our lives that is a big advocate for play and the power of play. Susie is related to one of my favorite people in the world, Naomi Schaefer, former boss clown of Clowns Without Borders. And to see how giving kids in disaster areas, refugee camps, giving kids and their adults a license to play can really change their lives. And that's what we do as an organization and when we perform in these different places around the world. And that is something that our buddy Naomi has been so passionate about. And even though they call her executive director, she'll always be boss clown.
I love that, boss clown. You know, I love that, and I'm so proud. Naomi's my cousin, and I'm just such a fan of her and her work with Clowns Without Borders. But I would love to invite Clown Without Borders to look at our own country and to think about places in our own country right here where we seem to lack that playful spirit. And I even just think about the way schoolyards are with fixed play structures and kind of no loose parts for kids to kind of build stuff with and imagine, and no area that's sort of, I know this sounds dangerous, but unsupervised from the adult eye or unstructured. The kids need, like, when I was a kid growing up, we played stickball in my neighborhood in Brooklyn. And there was no parent out there to kind of solve the problems. We had to solve them ourselves. And that was really hard. Like sometimes we got into fights and sometimes it was, not that fun. But in the end, it was fun. And it's a highlight of my childhood is remembering playing games with the kids in my neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, if I was writing a script to kind of lead into this, I couldn't have done any better than you just did. Clowns Without Borders, we do have an initiative to start performing here in the States, and we have had a couple of performances in New York City and California, performing not only for migrants, but also for people who just need a laugh.
Yeah, I love that. And you just remind me too, I live now in a pretty rural place in New Hampshire, southwestern New Hampshire. And maybe, people who haven't lived in a rural spot would imagine that kids in rural communities are still playing like full on, they're out riding their bikes or, I don't know, running through the woods. But I have noticed that that is not true. There is really a shift in how kids are playing even in rural communities where there's all this open space for them to be in. They are inside on devices, and that is the majority of how they're playing. Or they're on a soccer field with parents moderating every move of the game.
Yeah. I think one of the benefits of Forest Magic for Kids is getting kids out into nature with parents to let the kids kind of solve some issues or whatnot, giving them confidence to then go out with their buddies and be a leader and introduce their buddies to the joy of playing. I remember having so much fun running through the woods with a stick in my hand, thinking that we're chasing down a Tyrannosaurus Rex or whatnot, and tossing our spears at a place in the distance, and sometimes they would land on our friend, but get up, they'll be resilient. The kid would get a.
Yeah, there's so much research and evidence that shows the importance of play and free play among children, which is really child-driven. I'm involved, or I'm part of this organization called IPA, International Play Association, and it is really all about the benefits of play for children. And let's not forget adults too. Like maybe we need a little more play in our life as well. And it's really up to us as parents, or if we're involved in young children's lives, to kind of open the door to them and model some of it and then let it go free and kind of step back from it so that it is really child-centered and child-driven.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I really love is getting together with somebody that is passionate about something, even if I know nothing about it, and hearing them talk about what it is they're passionate about. I had an experience when I was the only person on a tour of a cavern system down in Virginia. And as the guy started telling his canned jokes and whatnot, I'm like, do you know something about this? And he's like, yeah, I'm a geologist. And I'm like, good. Forget the jokes. Just tell me what you love about this cave. And he's like, really? All right. And I don't remember a whole lot. I just remember it was a wonderful time. And that's what I feel like when I'm speaking to you.
Well, thank you. Well, I am really passionate about it. I've just loved my work, bringing people outside and helping them to connect to the natural world through all different ways. And that's really people of all ages. But I especially love when I have the opportunity to work with children, because we kind of talk the same language. I'm still out there getting excited about finding a woolly bear caterpillar. I am thrilled when I find a salamander, and I love that kids can still be excited about things like that.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story about being excited out in nature. A few years back, me, my beautiful wife, my daughter, and her fiance went to Costa Rica. Mm-hmm. And we are on a tour of the rainforest with a very knowledgeable guide. And I think the guide kind of sensed that I was a little antsy and wanted to kind of go off and explore by myself. And he just said, Senor, do you see that leaf there? And I said, yeah, this one? Yeah, just lift it up. I lifted it up, and he goes, that's a viper. They're all over the place. And I go,
stay with the tour.
Then, okay, I'm going to stay with you.
I mean, I have to say that that's also a really exciting part of nature, I think, is the idea that there's things in nature that are a little bit dangerous. And especially as our children get older, and risk play is really important. I'm not encouraging kids to go out and play with a viper, but the idea that the natural world is kind of where we can kind of stretch ourselves to figure out what works for us, so kind of figure out our own risks. And when kids spend time outside, that's a lot of what's going on. From the youngest, like, can I get from one place to the other? Can I climb up this rock? To, can I climb up to the top of a tree? To, can I paddle down a whitewater river? Can I rock climb up a mountain? Like, all of that is really important in developing kind of confidence, resilience, and the ability to assess our own personal comfort with how much we're willing to risk.
Yeah. What a great way to get kids active. Forest Magic for Kids. I love that you created this book. I love hearing your passion. Now that you are a children's author, do you have the bug? Are you going to continue to write books for kids?
Yeah, actually, I have a book prior to this called The Animal Adventurer's Guide, How to Prowl for an Owl, Make Snail Slime, and Catch a Frog Barehanded. And it's sort of similar in that it's over 50 different activities that are really all animal-based, because my work with kids has shown me that kids are really interested in animals, and it's a great way to kind of get them interested in the natural world is through animals. So that's my first book. Forest Magic is my second book. In September 16th, my third book is coming out, and it's the Book of Fairies. And it's all about, actually, this is kind of cool. It's a book I started when I was 8. It has fairies that I imagined and invented when I was a child. It also has a lot of folklore and mythology from Western Europe. And then it has some fairies that are recently newly invented. So I'm excited for that to come out. And that's for families too.
Well, you have an open invitation to come back later in the summertime, and we'll celebrate the fairies. In the meantime, where can people go to find out more about Forest Magic for Kids?
Well, they can check me out at my website, which is just susiespikol.com, or they can follow me on Instagram, which is just under Susie Spikol, or you can get Forest Magic for Kids at any, hopefully, bookstore, independent bookstore in your neighborhood, or you can also look to Amazon.
Well, and if the indie bookstore that you love doesn't have the book on its shelf, you just have to go up and very nicely ask, hey, can you order this book for me, please, sir? If he says no, you say, I'm going to find a Viper and bring him back into the, no, you don't do that. Oh, another thing, please go to your public library and request they carry the book.
That would be awesome. As somebody having grown up in Brooklyn, I was a library addict. I still am. I love libraries. In fact, my daughter is about to graduate from University of Illinois with a Master's of Library Sciences. So she caught the bug from me.
That's great. Well, libraries are so very, very important, and I love performing in them as I said here on the podcast, my middle school library probably kept me in school. I think if I didn't have that resource, I might have been invited to leave.
I love that. I just think libraries are such an amazing, democratic concept. The idea that books are there and you can go in and take them out and read them and look at them and then return them and somebody else can take them out. I mean, it's a brilliant, radical idea that I hope continues forever.
Amen. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Forest Magic for Kids. Our guest has been Susie Spikol. Hey, Susie, thanks so much. We'll see you later on in the year.
Thank you, Jed. This was awesome.
This episode is brought to you by The Mystery of Mystic Mountain, a great middle grade novel by Janet Fox. Becca Soloway's perfect summer goes up in smoke when her mom flees a looming divorce by dragging Becca to a Montana resort. To make matters worse, her mom's hasty booking lands them not at a luxury spa, but at an aging dude ranch called Far Away. Becca is miserable until she meets the Wrangler's son, John, who shows her what might be the first clue to a century-old mystery, the lost treasure of a Robin Hood-like outlaw known as Pearl Handle Pete. You and your kids are going to love this book, The Mystery of Mystic Mountain by Janet Fox. It deserves a place in your family library. Hey, my friends, would you like to bring a little warmth and magic into your home? Let me introduce you to Welsh Mountain Candles, hand-poured on a working Amish farm in Lancaster County. These all-natural, toxin-free candles are made from palm wax with a stunning crystallized glow, rich coconut apricot wax for a creamy finish, and essential oils for a pure, refreshing scent. Whether you're winding down, setting the mood, or just love a great candle, Welsh Mountain Candles are crafted with care and made to be shared. Visit welshmountaincandles.com. Use the promo code JED10 for 10% off your order today. Light up your home with Welsh Mountain Candles, where every candle tells a story. Oh my goodness, I am so excited. We have a very, very special guest here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast, joining us from the great state of Montana. Our guest is here today to celebrate the first book that she read with her stepdaughter. She's here to celebrate an amazing organization, and she's here to tell us a little bit about what I'm going to be doing in the not-too-distant future. Please welcome to the show, Naomi Schaefer. Hey, Naomi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really, really good. I'm so delighted to have you on. I'm so excited. I feel like a kid again. Here I am, almost 100 years old, and I feel like a kid again because thanks to you, I'm going to be starting a new adventure in the not-too-distant future. But we can talk about that a little bit later. I almost referred to you as Boss Clown because I think that's a pretty appropriate title. You are the...
I also think that's an appropriate title. Please, you may refer to me as Boss Clown. You know, you could also... That sounds great. I've definitely been called worse. So.
Well, Naomi is here. She is a boss clown at something very special, Clowns Without Borders. Can you tell us a little bit about this organization?
Absolutely. So Clowns Without Borders is a nonprofit, and we are professional circus performers, especially clowns, who perform in refugee camps, conflict zones, and sites of natural disaster. So we believe in the power of play and that we all cultivate resilience through laughter. You've probably seen that with your own kid, that when they're sick or they're hurt or they're frustrated, if you can find a way to invite a smile or some laughter, they can bounce back. And so we do that very same thing, but on a level where usually the frustration, the stress, the trauma is longer and often more prolonged.
Yeah. I'm imagining there might be some people out there thinking to themselves, a refugee camp, a disaster area. Don't the people there have way too much to do than sit down and watch a clown show?
Well, there are two answers to that. One is in terms of actual activities. Unfortunately, there don't tend to be a lot of activities, especially for kids, and refugee and migrant kids are among the most vulnerable population for not being in school. And then in terms of the question is like, wait, is laughter really the important thing? So laughter certainly does not replace shelter or medicine or food as a human right and as an essential need, but it is a right of the child. There's actually, under the Declaration of the Rights of the Child, the right to play is there. And play is how children develop. It's how they learn and grow, but it's also play for play's sake matters because joy matters for us all. So that's why we do what we do.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm currently listening to a great book by the woman who started the mindfulness movement back in the 60s. And I'm trying to pull it up so I make sure I say her name right. But it's Dr. Ellen Langer. The name of the book is The Mindful Body. And she doesn't talk about how clowns can help people heal, but she does talk about the connection between the mind and the body, and how our mind and where our mind is at has a huge role in how we heal ourselves. And so certainly, talking about going in and helping kids who are facing pretty grim lives, helping them smile and find some joy in life, I think is a pretty good medicine.
Absolutely. And if we think about trauma is, in the most simplistic sense, being stuck in the past or being stuck. And play, and especially laughter, is about being present. And so even just for a moment, the act of laughing and a kid engaging in a clown show, engaging in play, engaging in laughter, means for that moment, they are present. And what we hope is that one moment builds upon another. And again, it doesn't cure or erase the traumatic experience they've had. It doesn't change the stressful environment they may be living in now, or protect against future danger or trauma. But it does create a new possibility. It does create a rewiring of, in this moment, I'm safe. If you think about it, laughing and playing is something you can only do if you feel safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I never heard trauma being described as being stuck, but the minute you said it, it's like, yeah, the folks are stuck in that moment of fear or pain, and that can be exhausting.
Yes. And especially, for anyone, but, if we think about kids who feel their emotions in such a big way, and sometimes as an adult, what might seem like an outsized way, that experience of trauma can really take over. And so it can manifest in a lot of different ways. It can manifest as feelings really being suppressed and sort of a shut down state, but it can also express as real combativeness, right? Of this fear, this feeling of always needing to be prepared for danger. And so even when the external danger has passed, kids are still feeling that sense of danger. Mm-hmm. And of course, what we feel is real. Mm-hmm. Feeling scared means you are scared. Feeling unsafe means you are unsafe. And so that's why we use laughter as a way to just crack open the door at something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did Clowns Without Borders begin? Because it must have been like a genius moment at some point for somebody to say, hey, let's go bring those kids a smile.
Yeah. So Clowns Without Borders, it is such a great idea. And you want to know who had the idea?
Absolutely.
A bunch of kids. Of course.
Of course.
Where the best ideas come from. So this was during right after the Serbo-Croatian War, and there were children who were in refugee camps in Croatia who were pen pals with a group of kids in Spain. And the children in the refugee camp wrote and said, we're okay now, but what we miss is laughter. Now, the children in Spain were lucky enough to live in a town with an incredible clown. I might have just said clown with a great town, whichever. Tortel Poltrona. And these kids said, Tortel, you should go to this refugee camp. And bless him, he did. This was in 1994 or 1993, that first tour, and they went and performed a clown show. If you go to our website, you'll see we have beautiful pictures. Tortel balancing about 13 chairs between his arms and on his chin. That jaw drop that you just did, Jed, that's what we go for. And from there, the idea of Clowns Without Borders continued. And Moshe Cohen, aka Mr. Yoo-Hoo, founded Clowns Without Borders USA and started work in Guatemala. And so that was the first tour of Clowns Without Borders USA. And so that's how it began, this place of, no child without a smile.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And laughter. There is so much resource scarcity in the world. There is so much conflict over that scarcity, and laughter is not and does not have to be a scarce resource. We can have laughter. There's enough for everyone. And in fact, the more laughter there is, the more laughter that is created. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I see over and over again at shows. And for me, it doesn't really matter if the audience laughs because of something I did, or they laugh in delight because that grandma over in the audience had a funny laugh, mm-hmm. or it's so funny that a donkey wandered on stage, and that's what everyone laughs about. And so more laughter is more laughter.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about a sustainable, renewable resource.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about how you got involved. But before we do, you were telling me that there's a very special book. It was the very first book that you read with your stepdaughter. And what a beautiful story. Tell us a little bit about the book and that experience, please.
Absolutely. So it's this book called Baby Clown, and it's by Cara LaRoe and illustrated by Matthew Cordell. Something that's very fun about it is my husband is also a clown, and we actually met via Clowns Without Borders. I'm blushing, aren't I? Okay, podcast listeners, you can't tell. I'm blushing. So when, there was a certain part where I met his daughter, who's now my stepdaughter, and we went to the library and saw this book on display called Baby Clown. And of course, that was the book we both reached for. And we sat down and read it. It was the first book she and I ever read together. The day we ended up getting her a library card that day. And what's very fun is it's about a clown family. The two clown parents, Frida and Boffo, have a baby who cries all the time. And they get all of their clown friends at the circus involved. And no matter what happens, the baby cries. And there are these beautiful illustrations of adults trying very hard and the baby doing what it does best, which is crying. There are pages where the only text is, what? That's Lila's favorite part to read out loud. And in the end, they do find a solution to get the baby to stop crying. But do you want me to spoil it?
No. We'll get people to check that out. Yeah.
You'll find there, and it's a perfect solution. But it's just, I ended up buying a copy of the book, and then I think since then I've bought 10 copies. I give it to everyone, and it's also one of the first books that Lila read out loud to herself because she knew the story so well, and it was so fun to read.
As you were speaking, Naomi, and people who've been listening to the podcast know, I just get these weird flashes in my mind, and I just blurt them out. But we've talked a lot about representation and the importance of books being mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And as an old white guy, the idea of being represented in the pages of books, it's like, when I was growing up, everybody in books were white. But and it wasn't until you just spoke, talking about you and Lila, that I realized that one of the favorite books that both of my kids adored was a book written by Tommy DePaula called The Clown of God. And I'm realizing as I was listening to you that probably what happened was that Lila, Alejandra, and Chris somehow saw themselves part of these weird clown families represented in the pages of books. And talk about a light bulb going off in my head. It's like, yes, I get the concept. That's important. But it's like, I live that. It's like, yeah, my kids, they wanted to read that book over and over. And Tommy DePaula is a fantastic author. And I know Matthew Cordell is a fantastic illustrator. He's been on the podcast. I'm sure that Baby Clown is an amazing book, but I think more than anything else, it gave our kids a chance to see themselves as normal and, part of the world and something to be celebrated.
Yeah, it's so fun. And we read a lot of circus books. We find books that have step families in them, books that have, my husband is from Venezuela, so books that have words in Spanish. I mean, when Encanto came out, I know it's a movie, not a,
that's okay.
Not a book, but that moment, there's a line in one of the songs about arepitos con queso, and Lila was like, that's just like we do it. And that was, her first time of having that happen. It's, what's very sweet is, so we've been reading Baby Clown again because I'm pregnant. Talking about, I got another job.
Congratulations.
So we've been reading Baby Clown again, and Lila is, it's very funny to now, she's been talking about all of the things she's going to do to get the baby not to cry. And that's been, again, so it's sweet to have a book where, I mean, there's one page where truly it says the baby was just a big mad mouth. And it's just a page of a crying baby. And she's like, I know what to do about that. Oh, good. Because I don't.
Well, that's really fantastic. And we celebrate families reading together. And the reason I started the podcast, I didn't know that. I mean, I knew that you read to your kids, they're going to be able to read quicker. I knew that, but I didn't realize it was helping them build vocabulary. I had no idea that it helped them build empathy and help them imagine how they would deal with situations in the world that they found themselves in. And I had no idea that kids who are read with, you know, the kids who you read with, boy, I forgot how to speak English. Those kids grow up and make more money. They're more successful in their jobs. I didn't know any of that, but I did know that the relationship I have with my kids who are now adults began when we were reading together. And that led to watching movies together and cooking together and drawing and playing sports and all that. And now going to Central America together. It was, you know, it's just a beautiful foundation to build a family on. And I'm so happy that you shared how you and Lila bonded with Baby Clown. I'm curious, how did you get involved with Clowns Without Borders?
That is a great question. As with many of my favorite life moments, it happened in a library. I was in a library looking for work, and somebody near me was kind of talking to me, and I didn't really want to. And on a whim, I typed clown into a job search engine, and Clowns Without Borders came up. Clowns Without Borders was looking for a volunteer to work in financial administration, and I was like, oh, I can do that. And I guess in some ways the rest is history, in that at the time the organization was all volunteer run. Now we have a part-time staff, and that was a big transition to be part of.
Wow.
But I think the emotional reason, the better reason, is I took clown classes as a child. I had a speech impediment, and I felt really self-conscious about that. And I wanted to be big and bold, but didn't want people to ask me to repeat myself or to sort of say like, oh, where's your accent from? And so I took a mime class as a kid, a place where it didn't matter. And that was a place where I got to be big and bold. Clowning was definitely not supposed to be my profession in any ways, but in 2015, I went to Beslan, Russia, and I taught and helped translate for one of my clown teachers at a school in Beslan, which had been part of the Beslan school siege, which happened, a terrorist attack in 2004. And so this was part of the 1-year anniversary of that event. And being there at a place that in so many ways has been defined by that tragedy, but also in a school of kids who want to be kids, of teachers and educators and parents who've survived something horrendous, but also want to keep living, and kind of being there in that conflict of those two things made me realize, wow, this is really what I want to be doing. And so it did feel like great kismet when I then got back from Russia and saw that Clowns Without Borders was looking for a volunteer.
That's wonderful. That's really beautiful. I think there's so many people who kind of find themselves in their dream job or vocation without any prior knowledge. It wasn't like I always dreamt that I was going to do that. It's just sort of like in my own case, the kind of heavens opened up and said, you should do that. And I listened, and I was glad I did.
Yeah. In those moments, sometimes following your gut instincts, and then you're like, well, okay, that wasn't my best idea, but sometimes you end up in the career you were meant to have. Mm-hmm. So, sometimes you're like, well, okay, maybe I should have packed an extra headlamp and a coat, but other times you're like, yeah, this makes sense for me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids, and we hope you'll join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, we'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, and at Jedley Magic on X. Our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And of course, our website, readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Susie Spikol. Please be sure to check out Forest Magic for Kids. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Stella Charest, Megan Boucher. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. First off, thank you so much for staying with me despite my very scratchy, raspy voice. Pollen and allergies are doing a number on me this spring. But we'd also love to thank you for taking the time to listen, taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.